I'm joined now by Colorado's Attorney General, Phil Weiser. Thanks so much for joining me.
Brian, thanks for having me.
So I've been especially focused on redistricting in light of what Republicans have put forward, not just in Texas and North Carolina and Missouri, but also planning to do in Indiana and Ohio and Florida, and I'm sure any other state that Trump can get his hands on. And so about a month ago, I spoke to the Colorado governor, Jared Polis, and he wasn't especially interested in using Colorado as a weapon to counteract what Republicans are doing. Can you give some indication as we head toward 2026, where you have announced your candidacy for governor of Colorado, what your plan is in terms of fighting fire with fire here?
My plan is that Colorado needs an exception in our state constitution. When we adopted our Y and Z initiatives, it was a nonpartisan, independent redistricting commission that did its work once a decade. And that was living in an old world where we were working towards ending these sorts of gerrymandering. And the Supreme Court considered the following year that extreme partisan gerrymandering would be unconstitutional. I pushed hard on that to say it should rule that way. It didn't. We are now seeing something that we didn't contemplate back then, mid-cycle redistricting. In Colorado, we're right now 4-4. And even though our state leans heavily towards Democrats, we were for Harris in the last election and Biden around 10 points or so. But here's the problem. If other states are doing mid-cycle redistricting, we can't sit on the sidelines. We need to build in our Constitution a safety valve that sends a message. If you're going to engage in this behavior, we're not going to give you an unfair advantage. We're going to go ahead and do our part.
Why do you presume Governor Polis isn't interested in engaging in this fight right now, recognizing that this is when the fight is being brought to us? I mean, Republicans are not waiting as it relates to Texas, as it relates to North Carolina, as it relates to Missouri, and as it relates to all of these other states that they're engaged with right now. You know, I interviewed him, as I mentioned, about a month ago and pushed him for most of the interview on this issue, and he wasn't interested in kind of engaging here. So why do you presume that that is?
I've not talked to Governor Polis. I've talked to others. One nuance that makes Colorado a little trickier is we actually have to change our constitution. We can only do that in 2026. So Colorado wouldn't be able to do any mid-cycle redistricting for the 2026 election. We'd be doing our action for 2028. But my perspective is this. If this game continues and more states do this, we have to be willing to do our part. We can't sit on the sidelines. We're interconnected. And if we try to sit on the sidelines, we're basically enabling this sort of action. And that's something that I won't do. I will stand for fairness, and I will make sure that Colorado isn't putting ourselves in an irrelevant position, but we're willing to do our part. I don't know what others are thinking. Some have also said, by the way, we should focus on winning seats in 2026. What I would say is I agree with that, and we can
Right.
walk and chew gum at the same time.
Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. You know, you had mentioned that this wouldn't apply to the 2026 midterm cycle, but there are some states that could redraw their maps right now to fight fire with fire, counteract what Republicans are doing, try to neutralize these actions, and it would take place for 2026. What do you say to those governors who have the ability to do something, to step up and fight, and yet haven't exercised that power yet?
Well, let me first start by thanking Gavin Newsom and those in California pushing to negate what Texas is doing. I wish we didn't have to be doing this, but I'm also a realist. We got to live in the real world. And so my message to others is we have to live in the real world. And if in the real world you don't take any action here and you allow other states who do this mid-cycle redistricting, which is a new change, and you say, I'm sticking to the old ways, you're basically giving them an unfair advantage. You're enabling that behavior. We can't. We've got to make clear that if there are Texases of the world, there will be Californias of the world. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see the logic and we won't keep doing this. But whatever is happening in the real world, I'm a realist. I'm going to be fighting in the real world.
You know, there are Republicans who are seeing this right now and kind of only waking up after they're seeing what California is doing and saying, look at this gerrymandering. Look how egregious it is. We can't stand for this, making it as if they're just born today and not seeing what has preceded California's actions. And so what do you say to those people who are cherry picking examples to be able to give them justification to clutch their pearls?
I think the definition of chutzpah is that the person who kills his parents and then pleads for mercy because he's an orphan.
Right.
If you are the
Yeah.
person who acts in a way that's unfair and then someone meets your action and say, well, you've just changed the rules. Now the fair thing to do is live in the new world. And you say, wait a minute, you're not following the rules. That is incredibly selective. And let's just be clear. This started in Texas. No Democrat said we should do mid-cycle redistricting I've heard from. This started in the White House. It could end in Texas and California, and we could say, okay, we're done here. But as you noted, that's not what's happening. We're seeing a push in a whole bunch of other states, and there's only one smart reaction, which is to say we're not going to enable people trying to gain an unfair advantage. We're going to live in the real world, and we're going to make sure that we're defending this basic fundamental fairness, that it's what's good for the geese is good for the gander.
Yeah, I'm grateful, I can say, before we move on to the next topic, for your position on this, because I think this is the whole ball game here. I think that what Republicans are trying to do right now is entrench a permanent House majority. And once they're there, once they're able to redraw those maps, as we've seen, across the country, it is really hard to get out of a gerrymandered map. So I'm grateful that you're taking this position now when it matters. I want to move over to a different topic here, because attorneys general have been in the news in a big way as they're kind of the first line of defense in pushing back against Trump's overreach in the state. I'm curious why you think that Republican attorneys general, as Trump continues to deploy his troops illegally, as we're seeing thanks to trial court judges in California, in Oregon, in Illinois, why are these Republican attorneys general not abiding by their longstanding principle of defending states' rights as Trump illegally deploys these troops into different cities and states across the country?
I am frustrated that the rule of law and the principles of our democratic republic have become basically a partisan question. In my campaign to become next governor, I outlined just recently my commitments to protecting our democratic republic and the rule of law. People can go read it for themselves. Phil for Colorado, that's where we outline all this information. And what I believe is it is a foundational question. Do you live under the rule of law? Do we keep this republic? Or will we see threats to the rule of law? And I just put up a blog post talking about 3 threats we've seen in recent weeks to freedom of speech. It is outrageous to have the Federal Communications Commission chair taking someone off the air, pushing someone off the air for what they say. It's outrageous, as you say, and it's illegal to put troops into our streets when there's no basis in law for it. We're not being invaded. There's no insurrection. There's no emergency. This is a dangerous tactic. It's got to stop. And the other point is the rule of law. Selective prosecutions based on who the president likes or doesn't like is a real threat. It's a long-term threat to this republic. I don't know why more Republicans aren't speaking up. I will say the Oklahoma governor did call out this federalizing the National Guard as wrong. We need more of that.
Do you have some degree of concern over the Supreme Court ultimately hearing this troop deployment case, especially in light of the fact that, as you said, there is no basis to be able to deploy these troops? The 3 conditions, any one of the 3 conditions that have to be met, is that there's a foreign invasion, there's a rebellion or insurrection, or a failure of the local government to be able to effectuate its laws. None of those things are true. We're seeing images out of Portland with 12 protesters, half of whom are dressed as unicorns and frogs. And of course, there's no foreign invasion, and there's no inability of the local government to be able to effectuate federal law. This is not something, what we're seeing right now, these small protests outside of ICE facilities wouldn't rank in the top 100, top 500 of what we've seen in these states. But still, we have seen the extent to which the Supreme Court often feels kind of unburdened by the law or precedent and focuses solely on kind of adhering just to their political ideology as it relates to Trump. And so do you have any degree of concern that when this stuff gets up to the Supreme Court, whether they're hearing the Seventh Circuit case, whether they're hearing the Ninth Circuit case, whether they're adjudicating some circuit split, that they'll kind of just discard all of that, discard the law, discard reality, and instead just blindly defer to Trump?
There are 3 cases of the court that I would put on my, call it, core watch list. The case you mentioned, these cases around federalizing the National Guard. Second, birthright citizenship. And third, the Federal Reserve. It's fair to say that this republic has had some basic pillars. One of them is if you're born here, you're a citizen. That's been established for well over a century. And the fact that President Trump thinks he can take out a Sharpie and with an executive order change the Constitution, that's a core threat to our republic. And the Supreme Court is going to hear that case. And again, to your point, if they don't seem to find a way to uphold the Constitution, we're in trouble. The second point I mentioned, the Federal Reserve case, where we've had a longstanding tradition to protect the independence of the Federal Reserve. That's being threatened right now. That case is at the Supreme Court. That's something that we should keep an eye on. And third, the National Guard. A judge appointed by President Trump called this Portland action untethered from reality, said there was no basis in reality for the deployment and the federalization of the National Guard. If the Supreme Court gives the president a pass on this, and this is a dangerous potential precedent, which says if the president says it's an emergency, it's an emergency. We've just lost oversight. We've lost checks and balances. And then the president can say, and this will be a fourth case to add to our list, the tariffs. Oh, there's an emergency. We don't like Brazil for some reason, so we're putting tariffs 50% on Brazil because I said it's an emergency. Well, what's the basis? The president doesn't have to offer a basis. We're losing our basic legal principle, checks and balances. No one's above the law.
And so when we're staring down the barrel at the prospect of that, what is the solution here? Like and I know this is a bigger question than something that we can really implement or put into place right now, but what is the solution for something like that, where you have a Supreme Court that has just decided that the system under which we all live, under which we all exist in this country, just doesn't count anymore because, their focus is just deferring not to the Constitution, but instead to their political deity?
So, Brian, before the No Kings protest, I put up on the website I mentioned, philforcolorado.com, a post, and it said, "A republic if you can keep it." That was Ben Franklin's phrase when he left the Constitutional Convention. He was asked by people, what type of government do we have? He said, "A republic as long as we can keep it." And I said about those No Kings rallies, don't be afraid, show up and be peaceful. 7 million Americans did. We need to make sure that living in a republic under the rule of law is a popular issue. And there's popular pressure that says we won't give up this republic. We're not allowing masked agents to take people, American citizens, other persons, and deprive them of due process and hold them in violation of the Fourth Amendment. We have to make clear what is on the line. And the Supreme Court, they're aware of public opinion. And if they believe that the public cares deeply about these issues, that's going to help provide more, again, support to defend these principles. I do agree the court needs to show courage. They need to show backbone. And if they go ahead and defer and give up oversight and give the president a blank check, we're in trouble. But the question you asked is the right one. What can all we do right now as citizens? And the answer, use your voice. Showing up at No Kings rallies, making sure your representatives are hearing from you. We need more representatives in Congress saying what I heard Rand Paul saying recently, which is Congress is a coordinate branch of government. It's outrageous that the House of Representatives is literally MIA. Yeah. Meanwhile, the president is undermining access to food security right now, ordering the Agriculture Department not to use emergency reserves, which is a violation of the law. People will go hungry. That's why I filed my 40th case against this administration today on that very issue of access to SNAP benefits.
Well, I appreciate the fight, and especially on behalf of folks who don't have access to as big a megaphone and platform as you do. For folks who are looking to help your campaign, what can they do?
We have a lot of ways people can get involved. I mentioned the website, philforcolorado.com. We've got a merch store. Buy merch, wear it, represent. Post on social media and tag us. Colorado wants a fighter, someone who's not afraid to take on this administration. That's what I've been willing to do from day one. Our republic is at stake. Please volunteer, and if you can donate anything, and if you're not from Colorado and you want people in government to meet the moment, philforcolorado.com is where you can be heard. Please use your voice. Join and support campaigns like mine. 2026 is going to be a critical moment for our nation. I'll be there fighting for our republic. Thank everyone for listening, for joining. We've got important work to do.
We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Brian.